Hello, and welcome to Remember the Film, the podcast where we are not cops.
Cops, we're not cops.
I'm joined as always by my wonderful co-hosts Josh and Hugo.
Hello.
Hi. Hello.
Today, our film to remember is Martin Scorsese's The Departed.
Departed. Yes.
Which is going to lead in beautifully into our main topic, which is Mark Wahlberg, Boone or Bane.
Okay.
And if you
Pull it back just a little bit.
if you need me to pull that back, it's Mark Wahlberg, Boone or Bane, where we're going to basically discuss what Mark Wahlberg brings to his movies, if anything. And
That's one way to put it.
so we're going to get started with our discussion of The Departed. So we'll start with some general. You want me to start with the facts or some general thoughts?
Yeah. Let's go with the facts.
So some facts about The Departed. This movie is a remake of a 2002 Hong Kong movie named Infernal Affairs. One of the interesting facts about that was that Scorsese was apparently not aware that this was a remake until after he had already signed on to direct it.
That's interesting.
Yeah, which is, I'm always skeptical because I've heard that many, many times. Because I've also heard that the writer claims that he did not watch Infernal Affairs before writing the script. And I'm like, how is that even possible? This is an adapted screenplay.
Yeah, that seems a bit weird.
I see how that can happen. Like, because I feel like I haven't seen Infernal Affairs, so I don't know how closely it follows, but like the 3-sentence pitch of this is pretty interesting. And so like they may have just kind of taken that and ran with it, and maybe just the screenwriter just knew that and then wrote it.
Yeah, I suppose that's possible.
Yeah.
Could be.
But yeah, so interesting that Scorsese didn't even know it was a remake, and so that like clearly, when he agreed to sign on, I'm sure that Scorsese kind of develops a vision for what he was going to want from his movies even before he signs the contract to direct them. So I do intend to watch Infernal Affairs eventually just to see how similar or not similar they are, because if Scorsese didn't watch it first, then there's got to be some pretty significant differences.
Sweet pun in the title too.
Yes, excellent pun.
But it's not as good of a title as The Departed.
The Departed.
Like, The Departed is an all-time title. It's just so good because of the accent. Like.
Oh well, yes, 100%. And I'm gonna try, as Josh said, to rein it in a little bit.
Yeah.
I love the Boston accent, especially in movies, and especially in this one because they go all out.
Is this is this the probably this and Good Will Hunting are the top 2 Boston accent movies, you think? Or
at least in my book, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And of course, Matt Damon in both, and Matt Damon being from Southie has the quintessential Boston accent. Like
you had 2 accents, didn't you? You little. It's a family podcast, so I can't say the rest of the line.
We're trying to be a family podcast, but we're talking about The Departed, so. We may cross into some lines, so
Some quotes just may come out of me, and I won't be able to stop them. So I apologize in advance.
Oh, and I should probably throw up my image of one of my images for The Departed.
I love your dedication to your images,
yes.
Chris.
All the people who see them deserve them. All 20 of you guys who are going to watch this on YouTube, I appreciate it. But yeah, so. That was the first interesting fact. Next one, one of the main characters of the movie is Frank Costello, who is a Boston mob boss, played by Jack Nicholson. And one of the interesting facts was that he was actually not the first choice to be Frank Costello. He was second behind Al Pacino. But then after Pacino turned down the role, Jack was asked to come on board.
That would have been good.
It would have been good.
I want my environment to be a product of me. That's your Al Pacino impression for the day.
Hooah! Yeah, but so I think that would have been a drastically different take on Frank Costello as Al Pacino. But I definitely don't think that we were hindered by it being Jack Nicholson at all, because this is a fantastic performance. He is menacing.
He's
Frank
unhinged.
Costello. Oh yeah,
he's unhinged. So like, actually, Pacino would have been awesome too. Now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah,
I think they can both play the totally unhinged, like really huge performance that this movie needs.
Totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And well, continuing our discussion of Frank Costello, the character is based on a real-life Boston mobster, Whitey Bulger, who was actually still on the run when this movie was released. Which is like this movie came out in 2006.
Seven, yeah.
2006. So like, certainly in the way it feels to me, not that long ago. But it feels like this. I have a hard time imagining mobsters in
being
the
on the
modern
run.
time, like being on the run in the modern time. Like, you can't find this guy.
Yeah.
We got cameras everywhere. No one's seen Whitey Bulger.
But then they made an actual movie about Whitey Bulger.
They did.
A few years later. Yeah. With,
In 2015.
Black Mass.
Yeah, Black Mass. Johnny
Apparently,
Depp.
it's not very good.
I mean, I hear it was okay.
Right.
I haven't seen it, but I hear it was okay. I think Johnny Depp might have been Oscar nominated, or
I believe he was
close to being Oscar nominated.
Really?
He definitely won awards for the performance. I don't know if it was Oscars.
I think.
But
Then
I
maybe
also
it must
do
be
remember
another
hearing that
movie.
Whitey Bulger was not fond of Johnny Depp's portrayal of him. So
I'm not sure I would be fond of Johnny Depp portraying me either. So in Whitey Bulger's defense, but I hear he's good in it. So I don't know.
yeah. Next fun fact: Matt Damon plays the corrupt cop Colin Sullivan. And originally, when the movie was being cast, Brad Pitt was cast as Colin Sullivan. But then
Oh wow.
the reports that a lot of reports that I read said that Brad Pitt claimed that he felt someone younger should play the role of Colin Sullivan. And others say that he backed out because he was going to make Babel, which also came out in 2006, directed by
Terrence Malick.
Alejandro and
Alejandro
Inarritu.
No, Alejandro Inarritu. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I'm
so
confusing
like
the other one.
I mean, choosing between those two directors, I mean, they're both pretty good directors. So like, I probably would have gone the Scorsese route, but that's just me.
Has Brad Pitt worked with Scorsese? He hasn't, has he?
I don't think he has. No.
Can't think
No.
of anything.
But he did
No,
stay on.
definitely
as,
not.
Brad Pitt did stay on as a producer for The Departed.
Yeah,
That's
Plan B.
interesting.
Plan B is Brad Pitt's production company,
Yep.
and they produced this. Yeah.
Which, as I recall, in the Oscars, seeing Brad Pitt on stage for The Departed, I'm like, what did he have to do with this? Another casting. Most of the fun facts I have are about casting, and I think that is interesting in the grand scheme of this movie. But Alec Baldwin was not the original choice to play Ellerby, and was cast after Mel Gibson turned down the role to work on Apocalypto.
Okay.
Oh, what could have been.
I think we dodged the
Yeah.
bullet with this one, guys.
I mean, I love Alec Baldwin in this role, and I'm
100%.
He's great.
I'm happy he's here.
He's really good. He's really good in this.
Mark Wahlberg, who is, of course, going to be a big focus of today's episode, was nominated for Best Supporting Actor on this movie. And like much of the rest of the cast, he was not the first choice. In fact, he wasn't even the second choice. Others named that had been considered prior to casting Wahlberg were Ethan Hawke, Ray Liotta, and Dennis Leary.
All
Ray
would have been
Liotta.
awesome. They all would have been awesome.
Honestly, they all would have been
Yeah.
pretty good in this role. So.
But
But
yeah, I think Wahlberg is really good in this. Like he doesn't have to do too much, but what he does is really good. Like playing the angry cop who swears a lot in a Boston accent seems to fit him.
I think he said he based his performance on like the Boston cops that used to like try to arrest him when he was in high school and being a rowdy youth. Yeah.
yeah, so
he's really good at that.
But yeah, so I think that those choices of Ethan Hawke, Ray Liotta, and Dennis Leary, any of those could have worked. They all had other prior commitments. Otherwise, it could have been any of them before Mark Wahlberg. Dennis Leary was recording his show Rescue Me at the time, and of course he was the star of that, and that show went on for many, many years. So, it looks like it was an okay choice on his part to pass on The Departed. But speaking of all the awards, this movie, The Departed, did end up winning the Best Picture Oscar, in addition to Oscars for directing, adapted screenplay, and film editing.
Thelma.
And what I think is interesting about this is that Scorsese claims that he never thought about this movie for awards while they were making it, because of how violent it was. And I'm a little skeptical of that remark, because every movie that Scorsese touches gets considered for awards. So, I mean, is he really not considering the awards when he's making these movies?
I think I think nowadays Scorsese's movies are certainly always considered for awards. Maybe not always though. Not everyone he made was. And I completely agree with Scorsese. This is not a typical Oscar Best Picture winner, considering how violent it is. No. It's maybe the most violent. Well, No Country for Old Men won the following year, so I guess they were on a hot streak. Or I'm sorry, 2 years later? No, yeah, the following year.
Following year.
But those two aside, like Best Picture winners aren't usually this violent. And I sent you guys a Vanity Fair article about like the Oscar race in 2006, and The Departed's win did kind of come out of nowhere. Like, they didn't really do like a traditional Oscar campaign. So like, if Scorsese, while making it, didn't think it was going to be an Oscar movie, maybe the studio agreed as they were promoting it.
And they didn't do the campaign that they would normally put behind a movie like that.
Not the traditional campaign, no. And also, like, Scorsese had just gone through the award season campaign ringer with Gangs of New York in 2002 and with The Aviator in 2005. And that's exhausting. Like, it's a lot of interviews, a lot of travel for, like, months, a lot of handshaking and baby kissing. So, like, he just didn't feel like doing that again.
I suppose that's possible,
yeah.
Especially the way Gangs of New York got all those nominations, and
0 for 10,
and didn't win a single one of them,
and no wins.
0 for 10,
and so maybe he really did go into this movie like, I'm not even going to try, because like if I can't win any in Gangs of New York,
yeah.
But to a certain extent, I feel like there is a bit of a narrative behind this movie being the one that finally gets him his Oscar that he deserved, because like all of his movies in his career kind of got sort of ignored, either because they were too violent or because just they weren't what the Academy was looking for that year, I guess. But like Goodfellas didn't win, and like Raging Bull, Taxi Driver and King of Comedy, all those movies were overlooked. So
we haven't actually said that this is the first movie to either win Best Picture or Best Director for Scorsese.
For Marty Scorsese,
which is pretty wild.
It's surprising.
Yeah, we don't have to relitigate this, but it's wild.
Yeah, and we are going to talk more about that, like, in our general discussion of like, where it fits in terms of all of Scorsese's movies and and all that. But the last fun fact I wanted to mention, because I was definitely on a casting kick while I was getting these fun facts. Roughly 50% of the $90 million budget went to actors' salaries for this movie. Which
that makes sense. It's
a huge budget for actors, but the movie did go on to gross worldwide $291,465,000. So,
so it did okay.
Not too bad.
Money well spent, yeah.
And that was my point, is that this really does feel like, while that was a huge budget for the actors, I don't think that they did any bad casting. Like, every bit of casting in this movie worked for their roles, and even all the way down to the secondary cops are good performances.
Anthony Anderson. Yeah.
And I think it shows. So, like, sometimes I feel like that too much emphasis is placed on getting big name actors for movies. But in this case, I really do think that it paid off. That because even their lowest actors are lowest tier actors are nowadays, pretty big names.
Shout out to Kevin Corrigan, who plays DiCaprio's cousin.
Yes.
I love that guy, and he's really good in this.
He also has one of my, one of the lines that I think is one of the funniest in the movies, but that's going to come up in our discussion as well, is how funny this movie is. But so let's go on to our general thoughts of the movie.
But also Martin Sheen. I love Martin Sheen in anything that he's in. Like, he's so good always. Like, he makes anything that he's in makes it watchable for me.
I also like with Martin Sheen. I also always feel like he's kind of lovable, and that really fits with Captain Queenan in this role.
I think older Martin Sheen is lovable. You're a West Wing guy, right?
I am a West Wing guy. I even thought he was lovable on West Wing, man.
That's probably why you feel a certain way about Martin Sheen. But I'm also thinking about like Apocalypse Now.
Apocalypse Now, yeah.
A little more nuanced than lovable.
Okay, I mean that's
back then. Yeah.
Yeah, but we're talking 30 years.
Unhinged.
We're talking late career Martin Sheen. I got you.
Yeah. But so like Captain Queenan is a really interesting character because he, the whole movie's about corrupt cops. And not just corrupt cops, but like jerk cops. Every cop, even the good cops, are not really nice people, for the most part.
Not at all.
He's a nice, warm moral center, I think is what you're getting at. Yeah. He's a guy you can trust and you feel comfortable around him, and like he's yeah, and that's a welcome relief in this kind of movie, in this kind of world.
Yeah. But yeah, so our general thoughts. I can kick it off. The Departed is one of my absolute favorite movies of all time. It is probably my number 2.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
So I truly
awesome.
do love this movie, and I know that it has over time developed kind of a film bro reputation.
Has it?
Not to the extent of like Pulp Fiction and things like that, but I think basically when I talk about like film bro movies, I like picture a college dorm room.
Okay.
What are
I see
the
what you're
posters?
saying.
What are the posters you see on the wall? And The Departed, especially when I was in college, The Departed, was one of those posters that I would see in people's rooms. Like, have you even seen this movie?
It was also pretty fresh when you were in college. When I was in college too.
Yeah. But so it's definitely not film bro like we had the conversation about Pulp Fiction in our Tarantino episode. But some people it has that reputation, and just like Pulp Fiction, I think that anyone who attributes it to that sort of like level of movie fandom, I think is doing it a disservice, because it is a fantastic movie. You can argue that it's not Scorsese's best. I'm willing to hear those arguments.
I will argue that it's not Scorsese's
exactly.
best. Yeah.
Me too.
And I'm not going to be mad at someone for saying that. I'm not going to be mad at someone for saying that this isn't in their top 10 favorite movies of all time or anything. But honestly, for me, The Departed came out when I was a freshman in college. And I honestly I think I can credit The Departed with being the moment that I realized how much I love films.
It's a foundational text.
This is a foundational text for me. And like it was very late in life where I realized that like my affinity for movies is above average. It's not, like everyone enjoys movies. But The Departed was when I realized that I really care about movies and the way they're made and the people in them and all that stuff. So this is a foundational text for me, as Josh likes to call it.
Fantastic, yeah.
What about you, Hugo?
So yeah, The Departed I think is great. It's I think it's a bit more, even though yes we do talk about some of the violence that is in it, but I do think it's slightly more traditionally a crime drama compared to some of the other Scorsese films that I think are a bit more stylistically interesting, if that makes sense. In the sense that I think some of his other movies have more of a distinct Scorsese feel to them that this movie, for me at least, has a slight bit less. I think it's a bit less showy in the way that it's directed, and something like that. But I mean, that said, it's like I think for me, it's kind of a middle of the pack Scorsese film, which is still like an 8 out of 10 or higher, because anything he touches kind of turns to gold. So yeah, I think it's brilliant, and I think the performances are all great. The music's fantastic as usual. I don't know what else to say. I think it's great.
Okay.
What about you, Josh?
Yeah, Josh, what do you got?
Yeah, it's awesome. It's certainly great. I'm kind of like Hugo. I kind of keep this a bit at arm's length compared to some other people I know. Like Grizz, like my dad and both my brothers love this movie as much as you do. It sounds like it's among their favorites of all time, and so I'm kind of like the odd man out in that I think it's really great and I really love it, but I don't think it's among my favorites of all time. It's maybe not even Scorsese's top 5 for me. But it's still really good. And I don't want to. I'm gonna keep saying that because like I'm gonna be nitpicky about this later on. But I want to say at the top like it's great.
Yeah, we need to counter a little bit because obviously, like as I've said, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. So it like feel free to give me your arguments on that because otherwise it's just gonna be a bunch of people agreeing the whole episode.
But like you, it came out when you were a freshman in college, which means it came out when I was a junior in high school, and
senior
so
in high school. You were a senior, right?
I'm 2 years younger than you, so
Are you really?
I was a junior. Yeah.
I thought you were only a year behind me in school.
No, I was 2 years behind you. I'm 2012.
Oh, Jesus. I'm an old guy.
Okay. Sorry to spring that on you right now.
I'm so old.
But I say that, I bring that up to say that I saw The Departed like around the same time or within a year that I first saw Goodfellas and Taxi Driver and Raging Bull. And like The Departed, does not come out on top in those comparisons. So I think that's part of the reason I've always kind of kept it at arm's length is that I was discovering some of the best movies of all time around the same time. And so, The Departed's great. It's one of the best movies that year. I got no beef with this Best Picture win. Well, actually, a little bit, but we'll get to that. But it's flawed for me, and we can talk about why. But it's still really, really, really good, and I love it.
Okay, so one of the first things I wanted to talk about was I wanted to ask the question: is this Scorsese's most clever film in terms of dialogue? Like we've talked in previous episodes of what a big fan I am of Sorkin's writing, and Sorkin did not write this movie, but I like the thing I like about Sorkin is the clever, banter that he gives between his characters, and I think we get a lot of that in The Departed. A lot of really witty banter, laced with rampant swear words and thick accents. What do you guys think about that?
Yes, for sure. Like, basically, I'm thinking of his other work, and I feel like most of the quotes that I think of over and over again are usually said by Joe Pesci. And this is like if every character in this movie talks like Joe Pesci does in Scorsese's other movies. So like top to bottom,
Absolutely.
This is the best dialogue in a Scorsese movie.
And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I love this movie, more than any other Scorsese movie, is because of the dialogue. I like, and maybe this is a little shallow, like low depth of in terms of enjoyment, but for me, I love movies where you have a character that you can latch onto that is likable, and I like when characters are clever. And so any movie that has those features, even if they're a complex character like Leonardo DiCaprio's character in this movie,
you kind of latch onto it.
You latch onto them because he's a flawed guy, and he's doing some shady stuff in this movie, obviously, but he's undercover, and you know how much this is tormenting him to have to do these things. So at his heart, he's a good guy, and so I latch onto that sort of character and that sort of narrative, and then like I said, just the whole witty dialogues. I think this is the most quotable. I say most quotable.
It's up there.
Scorsese movie, but the fact of the matter is that these quotes are not quotes that you can really use regularly.
Somehow I do though.
But
I find a way. Yeah.
So did you guys have any favorite quotes or favorite scenes or anything?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what I can say. I mean, everything that Mark Wahlberg says.
Yes, every line he delivers in this is hilarious.
Quarters,
I was about to say.
3/4 of the words that come out of his mouth are stone cold classic quotes in my mind. But
it's basically Mark Wahlberg and Alec Baldwin in this movie. Every line they deliver is a hilarious quote.
Well,
amazing.
So I was going to mention this later. Wahlberg is really, really good in this, and he got a Best Supporting Actor nomination, but also he's positioned to be that kind of character because he's given all the best lines. Alec Baldwin at least has a few scenes where he has to move the plot forward a little bit. He's got to give the briefing on Costello and that kind of stuff. But literally every time Dingham talks, it's a quip. And so it's easy to come off the way he comes off.
And I don't think he ever talks because he's always with Martin Sheen's character, who's sort of the more older, wiser detective, who's
the moral center.
Who's the moral center, and he's doing the exposition, and then Mark Wahlberg just says some wild sentence like that nobody ever would say in real life, and it's great. It's fantastic.
Okay, among my favorite quotes that I can say because it's clean. I'm the guy who does his job. You must be the other guy.
Yes, and I use that one all the time.
Yes,
that's a great one.
That's one that I actually use in real life whenever I can possibly work that in there. But
also, Alec Baldwin hugging someone, going Patriot Act, Patriot Act.
Oh, that was so funny. It's extra funny with Alec Baldwin because his actual political leanings.
Exactly.
I also love. Captain Queenan, Martin Sheen, the line where he says, "Staff Sergeant Dignam has a style of his own. I'm afraid we all have to get used to it."
And right after that is, "What's the matter, smartass? Don't you know any effing Shakespeare?" when he quotes Hawthorne.
So it's just so funny. All the way through, everyone has a moment where they get to deliver some funny lines, except for Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, I was going to say DiCaprio doesn't have any.
DiCaprio
doesn't
never
have much
gets to be
ha-has
funny
in this. No.
And I think that is appropriate. And that's one of the biggest strengths of the movie is, as we talked about already, was the acting across the board. But the way this movie stands out for me, especially Leonardo DiCaprio's performance in this movie, it stands out to me because you are supposed to view his character as not a charming guy, he's not a winner, you know?
Yeah.
And the fact that Leonardo DiCaprio can convince me that, you know, he's not a winner, that he is not a charming individual, is a excellent performance.
It really is.
It's not that he does have to have a little bit of charisma in order to like infiltrate what he infiltrates, but it's a very specific kind of charisma, but like off-putting, but also like you want to rely on him and be around him kind of thing. Like he is walking a very fine line, and you're right. He's really, really good in this.
Yeah, and I think this was right. This was right around the time when he was like his image as a proper brilliant actor was really exploding, because he'd started working in the early 2000s. He'd worked with Spielberg, he'd worked with Scorsese already, but I feel like The Departed is one of the movies that sort of relaunched his career as not just the pretty boy kind of lead.
I think it was The Aviator right before this, and then this.
Yeah,
in like the 1-2
it's around
punch
this
of those.
time though.
Yeah.
Because he's not. He also kind of looks sick most of the time, because he's supposed to be playing this kind of guy who's paranoid all the time and not sleeping and taking Valium like it's candy, and so I think it's a brilliant performance by him, and I think you can tell that from this he started getting more interesting, introspective, and weird roles. So yeah,
for sure,
he's great.
But obviously his performance isn't the only excellent one. We've kind of touched on this already. Every performance in here was good, and I know that that's one of the things Josh thinks is one of the greatest strengths of this movie. But I see, Josh, in our notes, you also mentioned that the premise is one of the greatest strengths of this movie. What do you mean by that?
Well, kind of like I said when we were talking about the adaptation from Infernal Affairs, is I think that I don't want to say that this movie is execution independent, because it's not, and the execution is really good, but also like when I was 16, I heard Martin Scorsese was making a movie about a set of gangsters and the cops chasing them, and the gangsters have a mole in the cops, and the cops have a mole in the gangsters, and like that's all I need to know. Like I'm in. This is already my favorite movie of the year, and yeah, sure, I'll watch it, but like I'm in from just the premise and the setup. And I think that this movie's great and the execution's good, but it's also kind of a mess. But it doesn't matter that it's a mess, because like it just, from the word jump, I'm in, and I think a lot of people are in. That's what I mean when I say the premise is one of the biggest strengths in the movie. It's just Scorsese making this kind of movie is just always going to be good.
What are some of the greatest strengths to you?
So many. What? Sorry.
What are some of the greatest strengths for you from this movie?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Josh, and I also think what it manages to do in terms of surprising you. I feel like the film has a lot of moments where it gets quieter, and then there's a huge scene out of nowhere that you didn't really expect. So, for example, the scene where we're going into spoilers at this point, I guess, because
let me put up the
we're
spoiler
half an hour in. So the scene where Martin Sheen and Leo's character meet on the rooftop, and they get caught by the Costello's gangsters, and Martin Sheen unfortunately dies. That's the scene that you expect. But then the scene after that, where one of the guys who got shot, one of the criminals who got shot, tells Leo, "Oh, I gave you the wrong address, and you came to the right one." And you showed up anyway. So how did you know? I think there's a lot of those little moments in the film where something unexpected sort of catches you off guard, and I think that's brilliantly done.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Strengths.
I'm glad you brought those scenes up, Hugo, because I know that's something that Josh wanted to talk about.
Yes, it is.
Go ahead, Josh. What's your question?
I mean, it's just that, I've seen this movie many, many times, a dozen, if not more, and I still don't, fully understand everything that happens, and I don't know if that's on me, or if that's on the storytelling, or if that's a stylistic choice that they're kind of, trying to keep me off kilter as an audience member. I'm not really sure, but a few things about that scene in particular, number one, Delahunt is Costello's guy who gets shot and killed in that sequence,
yeah.
And pulls Bill over and says, I told you the wrong address. Why did he tell the wrong address? And the next scene after the news announces his death and claims he was an undercover cop. I don't think he was. Costello kind of waves it off and says it's because they want me to stop looking for the rat. But like, was Delahunt with the cops? Why did he give Bill the wrong address? What was the setup there?
You think? My understanding of it is he actually messed up and gave the wrong address. That was a mistake that Delahunt made. And then, of course, when he sees Bill Costigan, Leonardo DiCaprio, at the scene, he puts two and two together that Costigan is the informant. And he knows that there's an informant because he's a cop. In addition to the additional suspects, the suspicions that their organization had about there being a rat. So since he knew that he was a cop and knew that they were going to go catch the informant there, he had to know at that point
there's another one in here.
that the informant was Bill Costigan. And so then when he gets shot and he's on his deathbed and he pulls Leo over and is talking to him and he says, "Why didn't I tell them? Tell me why I didn't tell them."
Yeah.
And then they reveal in the next scene he didn't tell them because he was a cop. He was a cop.
But I also think that Frank's instinct makes sense where he says the news are saying he was a cop, so I stopped looking for the cop. Like,
right.
You don't
I think
buy that.
That's an extra it's an extra wrinkle in terms of Frank Costello's way of thinking. Like he thinks that no, there's definitely still a rat, and I'm because Costello can't really trust anybody.
Right.
It would kind of make sense because that he would think that because it would be like the fact that the one guy that got killed happened to be the rat would be to him would seem like a weird coincidence. So I do think that whether he's a cop or not, it would make sense for him to think that there's another mole in there.
Right. So it makes sense for Frank to continue thinking that, and it also just happens to be the truth that he was an undercover cop.
But that brings up another question. It's not. I've always wondered about Delahunt. Every time I watch this movie, I'm not sure what to think of Delahunt. But this most recent watch was the first time this question came up in my head, which is why did Costello's guys kill Queenan? And Delahunt was among those guys. So if Delahunt's a cop, he goes up there, finds Queenan, and then is part of the crew that throws Queenan off the roof.
Right.
I'm not sure an undercover cop would do that. I don't think he would kill his captain just to maintain undercover.
Well, so you don't get to see exactly what happens on that roof, and I think that is a deliberate choice by the filmmakers to not show you what's going on up there. My personal feeling is that Delahunt goes up there with the guys, and things get out of hand because they go up there and Martin Sheen's like, any of you mugs got a light? I love that. And then they take it too far. And they're trying to get information about the informant and all that.
Yeah,
and
that's the thing. It doesn't make any sense for them to kill Queenan. Because they go up there thinking he's meeting his rat, or his informant, rather, and instead of finding out who the informant is or where the informant is, they just throw him off a roof? That doesn't make any sense.
So the rest of the guys are goons, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it was established earlier in the movie that not only are they just goons, they're not smart.
Fitzy's a dumb guy, yeah.
And I imagine that they go off the deep end, they take it too far and they throw him off the roof. And Delahunt is in a position where if he tries too hard to stop them from doing whatever they're doing, then he's going to draw eyes on himself, and that would defeat the purpose of him being a rat, right?
Okay, yeah. I mean that's all linear.
And it could also be that things start to go down. They're going to throw Queenan off the roof. And Delahunt now has to make a decision between blowing his cover and undoubtedly being killed himself.
Right.
Yeah.
Because even if he did stop them from killing Queenan at that time, now Frank Costello knows he's a rat, and there's no way that he survives.
Right.
That's true.
And I want to mention that we talked about how Martin Sheen is like a comfort in this movie. He's the warm moral center. His death is a major escalation in the story.
Oh, yeah.
When you see his body fall, DiCaprio is the first one to see it. It almost falls on him,
right in front of him.
I mean, I feel exactly what DiCaprio feels in that moment, which is, oh shit, what are we gonna do now? You know, like,
yeah, and how's he going to get out of this now?
Exactly. Yeah, like it's a really effective moment.
I think
Martin
about
Sheen's performance is
I think about a lot of moments in this movie in terms of how when I first watched it when I was in theaters. I didn't drink in my freshman year of college, so they had these. There was an organization on campus that provided activities for people who didn't want to go to parties and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of those activities they had one day was they provided buses to the theater, so that people who you didn't have to pay for a cab or anything like that. And me and some friends went to watch The Departed, the opening weekend. It was in theaters, and that's that moment where Martin Sheen comes off the roof. The audience is silent, like dumbstruck. And one of the guys in the audience, a few rows in front of me, just goes, "What?" And
that's great.
And so that moment stuck with me, and especially because a few scenes later, at the end of the movie, more or less, where Leo is now on the roof with Matt Damon, and all that, and they have the shakedown scene. Like I knew it was you all along, and well, not all along. I figured out it was you, and I'm bringing you in. I don't care that you deleted me from the records. I've got you. I'm bringing you in. And then they come down the elevator, and this is another one of those big surprise moments that Hugo's talking about. They come the elevator door, like those. Matt Damon says, "Oh, just kill me, just freaking kill me," and then
killing you.
I am killing you. Great line. Elevator door opens. Boom.
I have not thought of elevators the same way since I saw this movie. I've not been. Yeah. But I don't think anybody has.
Just every time an elevator door opens, you're just like standing on the side just in case.
Just flinch a little bit. But yeah, the elevator door opens and Billy Costigan gets shot in the head by one of the other police officers. And that moment, again, the guy a couple of rows in front of me goes, "What?"
Same guy.
Same guy. The whole audience was silent again. What? And then the rest of that scene progresses, and by the end of it, the guy's like screaming
in disbelief.
He can't believe this is what's happening, and I was right there with him. It was absolutely insane. And
it's really unexpected because at that point of the movie, you're expecting, he got him, and Mark Wahlberg's character is going to help him out and is going to save his face and reinsert him in society, and then the movie just goes downhill completely, takes a left turn. But if I can add a point to what Josh was saying, like these sort of there are different moments in the film where you can have a similar type of question where you're not completely sure of what actually happened and what is going on. And I think the film has some moments where the editing makes it a bit confusing. Like there are a few moments where the film jumps forward in time or jumps from one scene to another, and there's no clear indication of how these two scenes link with each other, and so it does seem a bit confusing sometimes. But on the other hand, it could be just intentional that it wants to add to your paranoia.
I think it's to add to your level of paranoia, your level of being unsure of what's happening around you. And the reason
the good guys are,
and this may be looking at it in retrospect, but it won Best Editing at the Oscars.
Yeah.
So that would lead me to believe that they believe, and Josh has opinions on that, but it would lead me to believe that at least in terms of the Oscars voters, that they believe that those things were intentional and not mistakes in editing.
No, I don't know if it is a mistake. Like, I do agree that it's probably intentional, and the intention is to make you feel that paranoia of not knowing who's a good guy, who's a bad guy, and anything can happen at any moment. But at the same time, I felt like the first time I watched it, this isn't something that I really noticed, but watching it again today, it did feel like on a rewatch, it felt a bit more disjointed because I already knew what the surprises were going to be, so that editing style wasn't quite as effective at putting me into the mood the movie was trying to set. And I was just like, oh, wait, so this is a year later, or how much time has passed? They're moving in together, now they're getting married. Like, it does move on.
It's moving at a clip
with those elements
for sure.
Yeah.
But
again, it's a relatively small criticism overall.
The first 18 minutes before the title drop in this movie are edited at such a crazy breakneck pace that it's hard to keep up. And I mentioned knowing the premise of this movie beforehand, and I did. I don't think anybody turns this movie on without knowing the general premise that, you know, it's a rat, two rats. And had I not known that, I would not have been able to follow the first 18 minutes of this movie because it moves so quickly and kind of, to Hugo's point, a little disjointedly. Like the time is kind of compressed and expanded in odd ways. Like Bill Costigan, Leo DiCaprio's character, is being interviewed by Captain Queenan and Sergeant Dingham, Martin Sheen and Mark Wahlberg, and like that's cross-cut with Colin Sullivan, Matt Damon's character, doing a lot of stuff, and like a lot of time passes in Colin's timeline that they're cutting to and from just during the interview with Bill that presumably takes like a couple of hours. And that's not that's not the only time in the movie where you're cutting between two scenes, one of which is taking place on one timeline and the other set of scenes is taking place on like a much larger timeline.
Yeah.
When DiCaprio goes to see Vera Farmiga's character, Madeline, the psychiatrist, Matt Damon's fiance, he first like talks to her about what he's been going through, and then it cuts to a different scene, and then it cuts back to Bill and Madeline talking about getting Valium, and then it cuts to a different scene, and then it cuts back to Bill and Madeline having coffee. So like that's like 3 scenes of Bill and Madeline that takes place over the course of a few hours, and like while that conversation is happening, you see the microprocessors deal with the Chinese, you see a lot of different like plot stuff happen, and like the fact that they like cut up that Madeline Bill scene just to show all that is like an odd choice. I'm not really sure, you know, what the thought process there was.
So with that scene, first I want to go back. You know, when he's doing the interview, that is to set up that Colin Sullivan is doing everything right and is the ultimate success story for the Boston Police Department.
He rises fast.
He rises fast. That's another quote, but probably not an appropriate one for us to share.
Yeah.
But that's to show that how much he's succeeding in parallel to the conversation that is happening with Queenan and Dingham and Costigan, which is that, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio's character has accomplished nothing and is a bum. He comes from a family of bums, and not literal bums, but you know what I mean.
It's not that he's a bum though. He's actually really smart. Like they actually say like you got whatever on your settees. You're an astronaut, not
you're an astronaut. You're not a co-op.
I mean, what they're doing is trying to rattle his cage, because what they tell him is you're both too good and also not good enough to be a cop, kind of. And like they're just trying to get under his skin because they're vetting him for the role they have in mind for him. Like I get all that. I get like the story. I get what that interview is doing, but it's I don't know. It jumps around a lot. Like Hugo said, like at one point, DiCaprio meets with Dingham and Sheen and says, "I've been at this for a year already," and I'm like, "Really? You have? I had no sense of that." Yeah,
I can understand the complaint.
We've only
about
seen a few scenes of that.
The pacing in terms of timing, for sure. What's up, Hugo?
Yeah, and to be completely fair, this thing with the passage of time being relatively unclear is something that I feel in a lot of Scorsese films.
I agree.
It's not just this one. Like Goodfellas and The Wolf of Wall Street, The Irishman less so because of the de-aging thing that makes it very clear what is happening when.
I mean, the passage of time is sort of the point of that movie, so they kind of
exactly
find a point of it.
It really is clear, but a lot of these Scorsese films, especially these crime dramas that he does, I do think that's the editing is really propulsive, which helps with the tone of the film. But at the same time, it does feel sometimes that the passage of time isn't very clear. I'm never sure how much time is passing. I'm never sure. Did this happen over 10 years? Did this happen over 5? This has happened in a month apart from each other. It does get a bit confusing.
Josh and I both have things we want to say. My thing is about what you were saying about the Madeline scene, the coffee scene. If you want to comment on what Hugo was saying first, go ahead.
I got a larger comment, so you do your thing, and I'll do my thing.
The in reference to the discussion about the scene where Leo's getting the prescription from Madeline and then they go get coffee, I think the jumping around in that scene is to show that, because during the whole conversation, Leonardo DiCaprio is kind of being a bit flippant with the whole conversation, right? And he's trying to play it cool and not be play it cool is not the right word. He's just trying not to make a huge deal. He's not trying to,
He's not actually trying to engage into the psychotherapy of it. He's just there to get the pills, really.
Right. And I think the jump cuts between all those things that happen, like that he's been involved with, is to show, no, this guy really needs the therapy. And that these are the things he's been doing. And, at the end when he's like begging for Valium and he says has his one real moment in that conversation, it's to show that, like, he's not just trying to get the drugs because he just wants the drugs. Dude kind of needs them because he's done some messed up stuff, and because we know that he is at his heart a good guy, those things will mess with you because he's been involved with some stuff that a good guy would never actually want to do. That's what I think the purpose of that is. And if you think that's a weak purpose for it, I understand, but that's what I think that scene is doing.
I think I'm just like pointing that as an example of how the movie kind of jumps around a lot and is a little bit disjointed. And it's not as coherent for me as some of Scorsese's other movies. But I put this in the outline, and this is what I was going to say earlier, Grizz, is maybe the incoherence is a little part of the point. I've kind of always like held that against the movie because I've seen it so many times and it still kind of doesn't make complete sense to me. But again, maybe to give it a more generous read, maybe that's a stylistic choice. There are a lot of unanswered questions I have. I've already mentioned a few of them. Another one I have is, when Queenan and Bill meet on the roof and Bill asks Queenan about the FBI and about the possibility of Costello being an informant for the FBI. Queenan says they're compromised. The FBI is compromised. And then that never comes up again.
Yeah.
And so like I'm not sure what to make of that. But again, maybe that's all part of the point. The fact that I don't know if Delahunt is a cop or not, the fact that I don't know if the FBI is compromised or not, like we don't know who to trust and who's lying and who's trying to kill you and that kind of thing. And the fact that the editing is kind of all over the place and it's disorienting, maybe that's all part of the point too. And I just want to put here that I put this in the outline. I think an under-discussed theme of this movie is the bureaucracy of justice and how that can be frustrating. This is a pretty frustrating movie for me at times, but again, maybe that's part of the point. Like the fact that, Queenan tells Bill, it takes time to build this case. I will get you out of this, but I just need time. When Leo's like, I've been at this for a year. Why haven't you arrested him yet? It's frustrating that they haven't arrested Costello yet, despite having this mountain of evidence against him. That's very frustrating to Bill and to the audience. The fact that Costello is an FBI informant and like that's why they can't touch him. That's very frustrating, but it's also kind of like the nature of how the justice system works. Like they need witnesses, and so they have to make compromises in order to get witnesses. Like they can't arrest Costello because he's giving them other guys. Like that's kind of like the nature of the system, but it's also very frustrating for us because we're watching Costello do all these things and we're watching Bill be put in danger and that kind of thing. And like the fact that Colin nearly gets away with it is very frustrating. Like Matt Damon he gives his statement in the microphone. He says, "I want to recommend Captain Costigan for the Medal of Merit." Like, you little snake, you're gonna get away with this.
Yeah.
And he doesn't, but only because Mark Wahlberg does some extrajudicial actions. He goes outside of the system and like commits murder. Like it's straight up. He's right.
He's the audience there, though, isn't he?
Right.
The guy in the audience, the guy in the audience with me, when that happened, yes,
it's like what?
But I think there's something to that like we watched 2.5 hours of police procedure, people trying to like do by the book, bring these guys down in the correct way, in a lawful way, and it doesn't work.
Because
and then the one thing that does work,
system,
right? But then the one thing that does work is just shooting them in the face and then putting on your little booties and walking out and leaving no DNA behind.
And at the same time, I feel like there's some veiled criticism of how the system works. Like the fact, even the line about the Patriot Act is, it is Scorsese sort of breaking through and commenting on how this works. The fact that in order to get the guy, you have to be so corrupt and you have to make deals with the guy, but at the same time, you're using a system that is, invading privacy to a perhaps worrying extent in the ability of what these policemen are able to do and what they can do, which is, within the system. So I think it all kind of comes back to this veiled criticism of it.
So
go ahead, Grizz.
I love this movie, but because we are starting to we're running long on this particular segment, I kind of want to move on to some of our key questions for this, and let's give our responses to these. Not you don't have to rush through it, but give a full response. But we're just going to move on to the
Rapid
question.
fire.
Is this a top tier Scorsese movie to you? I'll start with Josh.
No.
Okay.
Goodfellas, Raging Bull, Taxi Driver, and then this is B tier with like Wolf of Wall Street and I don't know, After Hours.
Okay. Hugo?
I think this is sort of almost top tier Scorsese, but kind of outside of my top 5.
Yeah, that's about where I'm at. Like, I love this.
Yeah.
This is great. It's just that Scorsese's made some of the best movies ever, and this is not one of the best movies ever.
So
and also I have Shutter Island really high because I love that movie. That it for some reason that one really worked for me because it's something different by him.
And it's psychological.
Yeah.
That's a thing that Hugo loves is a really
that I really enjoy.
Psychological movies. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
For me, obviously, one of my favorite movies of all time. So yes, I think it's a top tier Scorsese movie. In terms of Scorsese-ness, I think it would be on the lower end of the top tier Scorsese movies.
Yes, that's a great point.
Because Raging Bull, Taxi Driver, those are quintessential Scorsese at his most Scorsese. So
Yeah.
so yeah, definitely for me it would be top tier. But I can fully understand the argument for why it would not be, especially in terms of how Scorsese a Scorsese movie is. Next question: did it deserve Best Picture? Josh?
Yes and no. If you look at the other Best Picture nominees that year, I think this is the best one. But also, if you look at 2006 with 15 Years of Hindsight, Children of Men came out this year, and Pan's Labyrinth came out this year, and
The Prestige,
and none of those were nominated for Best Picture. I think Children of Men was the best movie this year, but of the 5 nominees, The Departed deserved it, I think.
Hugo?
Yes, I think it's deserving of being in that conversation for Best Picture of the year. And even though it may not be my pick, but it's definitely out of the ones that were nominated, I agree. It would probably be my pick.
I obviously think it was the Best Picture that year, but
Yeah.
I also in respect to movies like Pan's Labyrinth and Children of Men, those are groundbreaking and truly unique movies.
Exactly.
So I can fully understand the argument for why you would think that those are more Best Picture worthy. They stand out.
I think both Guillermo del Toro, who made Pan's Labyrinth, and Alfonso Cuarón, who made Children of Men, they both became Academy darlings later in their careers, and they both won their fair share of Oscars. But I think Pan's Labyrinth is the best thing del Toro's ever done, and Children of Men is the best thing Cuarón's ever done. So it's hard to
tough to argue with
tough
that.
Tough they were overlooked.
So, and then last thing I wanted to ask, I guess actually 2 more questions. Was Scorsese's Best Director Oscar a Lifetime Achievement Award for this movie? Like, did he get this award because he hadn't gotten the award for previous movies and it was just time?
To some extent.
He may have won regardless, to be honest, yeah.
To some extent, though, I can see that argument, because I could see how this movie might win the Best Picture over the other ones that I've mentioned. But in terms of just direction, like, Children of Men direction is everything for that film. Like, that film is driven by the directorial choices, and I think it became famous for them with the long takes and all that. So I do think not giving it to Cuarón on this specific year is difficult, but yeah. So, but at the same time, again, it's a very well directed film, so it's not like it was a crazy pick by the Academy or anything.
I mean,
like
it certainly
that.
wasn't a crazy pick. But
yeah.
It definitely felt to me like this was a makeup Oscar because of the
to
previous,
some extent, possibly,
to a certain extent.
That's kind of what I mean, like, yes and no. Like, yeah, he should have won it like 3 or 4 other times before this, so in that sense it's kind of a makeup Oscar. But also,
who won
like,
in 1990?
Probably Kevin
know
Costner,
that.
I imagine. I would think, but I'm not actually sure. That said, though, like, I also don't know. I mean, Alfonso Cuarón, I think, should have won, but he also wasn't nominated. Of the nominees,
right.
I think Scorsese is definitely the pick. It's not like, if this is a makeup Oscar, it's not like he took it from someone else who was more deserving. So it's like, he deserved it, but also, like, this isn't his best directed movie or his best movie either. But, I mean, whatever, that's the nature of the Academy.
Right. And then my last question, because this is going to lead into our main topic. We still have to rank the movie in our ranking, but the last question I wanted to ask is this Mark Wahlberg's best performance?
No, not for me. But it's like maybe top 3, top 2 maybe.
I think top three for sure. But I wouldn't say that it's his
For
best.
me, it is, and simply because, like, yes, it's, he plays a lot of cops, and he's a tough guy, and so this is a role. It's a role he was made for, and
it is.
It's a role where he can go as full Wahlberg as he wants to, and it can't hurt this role.
Yes, that's true.
I think it's like a little one note. That one note is awesome, so I'm not complaining. But like in terms of his best performance, like this is kind of only Mark Wahlberg doesn't have a ton of range, but he has slightly more range than what he's doing here. I think, if that's fair.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, so let's do our ranking. I'll just run through it real quick. At number 12, we have Godfather 3: Electric Boogaloo. 11, Sugarland Express. 10, Iron Man 3. 9, Matrix Reloaded. 8, Jackie Brown. 7, Mank. 6, Rudy. 5, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. 4, It's a Wonderful Life. 3, The Thing. 2, Boogie Nights. And number 1, we have Citizen Kane. We can go ahead and start with everyone else. Hugo,
sure.
What do you got first?
I would put it, based on this list, obviously, as a caveat, I would put it at number 4. I would put it below The Thing, above It's One for Life.
Josh?
Okay. I think I would put it behind It's a Wonderful Life. So it's behind Citizen Kane, Boogie Nights, The Thing, and It's a Wonderful Life, and it's ahead of Ma Rainey, Rudy, Mank, Jackie Brown, Matrix, Iron Man 3, Sugarland Express, and Godfather.
And for me, as it's one of my all-time favorite movies of all time, of course, I would put it number 1. But that's not how our voting system works. So we would have gone to above Ma Rainey's, with all of us agreeing it's above Ma Rainey's.
Yes.
And then Josh would put his hand down. Or no, sorry, then Hugo would put his hand down, right?
No, I
put my hand down, yeah.
So then it would be right above It's a Wonderful Life, because after that, Hugo puts his hand down.
Number 4.
So number 4, The Departed.
Get The Departed.
Okay, great.
I'm cool with that.
So every time we read off the list, we have to do the accent when we get to The Departed.
The Departed. You have to do it every time you say it, let alone reading the list.
Yeah. That's how it works.
So, for our main topic, we're talking about Mark Wahlberg and Boone or Bane. And the premise is, does Mark Wahlberg ever add to the overall quality of the movies he's in, or does he set your expectations at a level of mediocrity that he can either meet or fail to meet? And that seems harsh, but if you look at all of Mark Wahlberg's movies, and there's a lot of them, there is a lot of them, universally, save for a few movies, very mediocre movies. Like they're all 60s.
I think that's fair to say.
A lot of them are.
So is it? But the question is basically, is that a fault of Mark Wahlberg, or what's the reason for that, more or less?
I am curious how he chooses his roles, I think.
Yeah.
I have that later in the outline as a later discussion topic, but that's just kind of like a general thing. I know that he wasn't the first choice in The Departed. He also wasn't the first choice for a few of his other movies. And I wonder why the first choices turned them down, but then Mark Wahlberg said yes. I wonder if he's just like not as discerning, possibly, or maybe he doesn't care if what the quality of the movie is, and is more cares about like how his character comes off. That's a possibility, and I'm not going to hold that against him. A lot of people pick projects that way, I'm sure, but in general, when I see Mark Wahlberg's in a movie, I usually just kind of let that movie pass me by, and if I hear it's good, I'll check it out. But if not, I'll just kind of let it go, and that's where I'm at on Wahlberg movies.
I'm largely the same on that.
Yeah, I think he largely doesn't care too much about the quality of the movie. He's just doing something because, I don't know, playing a cop who shoots people is probably fun for him, and he's making a lot of money. But at the same time, there are some projects where you can tell he really cared. Like, I watched The Fighter this week, and that's a movie for which he trained for 6 years. He was the one producing it. He got in touch with the family of the actual people that he was portraying, because he wanted the character that he was playing, which is like, he's Mickey Ward, a boxer from Lowell, whatever, how do you pronounce that? But it's around Boston, which was kind of a local hero of his, and he really cared about that film, and I think it's his best performance because he prepared for years for that, and had the character, the protagonist around the set because he wanted to mimic his, like, you know, his mannerisms and all that. So I think the level to which he cares about the performance and the film varies, but when he does, he can be good. He's not amazing, but like decent.
Well, the thing about The Fighter is that was nominated. That had 3 acting nominations and 2 acting wins at the Oscars, and none of them went to Mark Wahlberg.
None of those were Mark.
That's to kind of repeat myself about Boogie Nights. I think that movie is really good, and Mark Wahlberg is passable in it, but everyone else is good around him. I mean, Amy Adams, Melissa Leo, and Christian Bale, for example, and he's fine. And I appreciate that he prepared so much. But a Mark Wahlberg movie I watched this week was a movie called Rockstar, which came out in 2001, and apparently Wahlberg also prepared for that one pretty heavily, where he grew his hair out. He grew his hair out. He like would walk around like the Sunset Strip in character, like in costume, in like his leather pants and whatever. And like, but that movie is just really boring. And like you know, there's a lot of extended sequences of just him lip syncing on stage in heavy metal gear. And like, when I was talking about like how he chooses his roles, I know that Brad Pitt was originally attached to that movie, but then he left due to creative differences with the studio. And I wonder if the creative differences was just Brad Pitt could tell this movie wasn't very good, and Mark Wahlberg's like, well, I mean, I'll get to play a rock star, so that's cool. So like, I'll do it. And
I'll do it.
I'm free. Let's do it.
Yeah. I don't have to sing. Great, perfect.
Yeah, he seems like the kind of guy who's like, oh, this is a cool cop character. Sure, I'll do it. I don't care what the script says. And, like, you know.
And like, you know, another thing about Mark Wahlberg is he has a lane, and he's really good in that lane. And I feel bad saying that because, like, famously he said about The Happening.
The Happening, yep.
Part of why he took The Happening is because he got to play a science teacher and not a cop or a criminal. And I'm like, you know, good for you, buddy. Like, go play parts that make you happy. But also, that movie sucks. So, you know,
it sucks, so and he's bad in it.
Yeah,
he's bad in it. But also, like, I'm not sure who else could have been much better in it. That movie's just ill-conceived and bad execution of an ill-conceived idea. So, like, I'm not sure who could have saved.
No,
Zoe Deschanel is also really bad in that, too.
Yeah,
like,
she's terrible in that. And I think she's a really good actress. So, yeah. And, I think he has, like, a few types that he can play quite well, which is, like, the goofball dad type, goofy...
That's the thing. I don't think he ever actually plays the goofy guy. He's in movies where he's in a lot of comedies, but he's not funny. He's
the straight man. He's the contrast to the goofy guy.
That's what I mean by goofy is more of a sort of a I can't explain this. He's like the dad character. He's like such a dad character.
Because he's a serious guy, and dad doesn't let you have fun.
Yeah. But also he'll crack a joke, but it'll be a lame joke. That type of thing. He's that type of character, in my opinion.
But I think
he kind of works in that sense.
And it does work in some cases for sure. But when he does those dad jokes, I'm not sure that they are supposed to be dad jokes.
I know.
Sometimes I feel like they were written as actual jokes, and he just can't deliver an actual joke.
That could be, I guess. Yeah.
Having watched a few of his movies, more movies of his this week than I have probably ever, I've started to kind of like see the code in the Matrix, and I see like what kind of character he plays over and over again. And like, he plays a lot of gritty action heroes. Like but that's on kind of only one sliver of his filmography. Like, but between his comedies and his action movies, I feel like what he always plays is a good guy.
Yes.
Like, his characters are never the fool. People don't get the best of his characters. He's always the funniest guy in the room, the toughest guy in the room. He can beat you in a fight. He's good at sex. He's not going to be made a fool of, like that kind of thing.
He has a giant schlong.
Sure, but like that's kind of like, you know, talking about a Mark Wahlberg character. Like, and I mentioned like how he maybe picks his roles. I think he might just pick his role based on what would make him look the coolest. You know,
over
quality of the movie. And like, you know, I'm not disparaging him because again, a lot of guys are like that, but just. That's what I'm seeing is like he just wants to look cool and maintain his image, and I don't fault him for that. But that's kind of the pattern I see in his characters.
And like you said, it works
taking
for some
big
of the movies.
chances.
It works for some of those movies that he is the cool guy. Like the other guys, a lot of people truly love that comedy, and I enjoyed it. I don't think it was top tier like some people do, but you know, he's not bad in it, and Will Ferrell is excellent in it. And
that's actually, you asked my favorite if Departed was his best performance. I think the other guys might be Mark Wahlberg's best performance, or at the very least, it's the best utilization of his skill set.
Yes,
like taking what he's good at and letting him do exactly what he's good at. Like all of Mark Wahlberg's skills are on display in the other guys.
Okay,
yeah, him just being annoyed by Will Ferrell all the time, it does work.
The other one that I consider for one of his best performances is actually Ted.
Right.
Again, we established that he's always the cool guy, right? Ted is the one time where we actually see him be a little bit of a goofball, like you said, like where he has, you know, the whole he's afraid of thunder thing, and seeing Mark Wahlberg, notorious tough guy, you know, snuggled up in bed with a talking teddy bear, singing a song about, you know, thunder and how you know, because they're buddies, thunder can't hurt them anymore.
Yeah,
you know, like it's funny because what we know and feel about Mark Wahlberg in his other performances. So I think the reason I think The Departed is a better performance is because I think Mark Wahlberg actually does perform the role of Dignam well, and I could say that in other guys as well. He performs that role well. I think Ted is probably the movie that takes advantage of your expectations of Mark Wahlberg to the greatest effect.
Yes, and it's interesting you say that because I think that there are a few times where, to give an ungenerous read of Mark Wahlberg, I think there are a few times where the directors knew what they were doing and harnessing Mark Wahlberg's image and power, and maybe he didn't know what they were doing. I'm thinking about Pain and Gain is a Michael Bay movie that I think is actually a really, really good movie with Mark Wahlberg. I hate
so much.
But it's Mark Wahlberg and The Rock, and Mark Wahlberg plays this giant meathead gym like personal trainer who thinks he's smarter than everyone else, and he's absolutely not. And that's where the drama of the movie comes from, is he tries to pull off this like scheme and it goes horribly wrong. Yes, and maybe Wahlberg was in on the joke, but also maybe he wasn't. Because it really is like a joke about that kind of guy and how much Wahlberg kind of is. Maybe he's not that kind of guy. I don't know. Yeah. But Boogie Nights also, to some extent, might also have been like a harnessing Wahlberg's powers against him to some extent. Like, I'm not sure how much he was in on, hey, Mark, you get to play this like super sexy dude who has sex with a lot of women. Like, come join us, right? And he's like, oh yeah, that sounds good. And actually, it's a little more nuanced than that. And I don't know. Maybe he was in on it. Maybe he wasn't. I don't know.
Pain and Gain is like a truly awful movie to me because, like I said, I like movies where there is someone likable and there's no one
likable in Pain and Gain.
There is no one clever and there is no one likable in Pain and Gain. And like to make The Rock not charismatic is mind blowing to me. That movie is so bad. And
Anthony Mackie too. I think it's good. Like I dig that movie. I think it's good.
No one in that movie makes a single decision that any rational person would ever make, ever.
Yeah, buddy, I like Coen Brothers movies, so obviously I don't need rational decisions all the time.
Yeah, good. I'm a little insulted on the Coen Brothers' behalf that you just lumped Pain and Gain in the same category.
No, I'm just saying, characters making bad decisions. Like, give me the Safdies, give me the Coens. Like that's my shit. It's great.
That makes sense.
I'm sorry.
There's
I have to spoil just a little bit of the
but...
movie. There's a part in the movie, and this is a spoiler for Pain and Gain a little bit. Hugo, you don't mind if I spoil?
No, don't.
The spoiler is there's a part of the movie where they're disposing of a body, and the method they choose to dispose of the body is to grill it.
Oh my god! I forgot about that. That's hilarious, though.
They're out in the front driveway grilling human body parts and like waving to the neighbors and stuff.
And wait, you're telling me this is a bad movie that you don't like?
That's sold me on the movie. I'm going to watch it tonight. That's brilliant.
It's so bad.
But what Valentine's Day movie. That's
bringing it back to Mark Wahlberg, Boone or Bane, that movie is terrible, but The Happening is so much worse.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Because at least Pain and Gain was made was an interesting premise, an interesting story behind it.
Here's a take on The Happening, and here I don't want to get too far into M. Night Shyamalan's filmography, but like if you look at the movies he made, including the ones that work, Any high concept horror movie or high concept psychological thriller like he makes, they have the potential to go off the rails. And his first movies were kept on the rails, I think largely, well, the writing was better, number one, but also he had really good central performances from Toni Collette and Haley Joel Osment and Mel Gibson.
Bruce Willis.
He's great in Signs. Bruce Willis, Joaquin Phoenix, Bryce Dallas Howard. They're all really, really talented performers, and they kept those movies on the rails much as they could. And Mark Wahlberg just isn't as talented of a performer as those people, number one. But also, like, again, the writing is considerably worse, I think, in The Happening than in anything else. So I'm not sure anybody else in The Happening would have salvaged that movie, but
no, I don't.
It was a rough look for Mark Wahlberg, for sure.
Really
I think that movie.
Go ahead.
That movie is dead in the water at the script level. It's just not. Yeah.
I feel so bad for John Leguizamo because the dude has just been in some absolute stinker movies, and I don't know that it's his fault, but and I don't know that it's Mark Wahlberg's fault either on the Happening. But like, man, tough luck being in Spawn and Mario Brothers and The Happening. Like, sorry, dude. Tough break there, John Leguizamo.
John Leguizamo's been in some great movies, too.
I know, he has.
I'm
but
sure
like,
he's had a great career. Yeah.
His stinkers really stink. That's
Yes.
So other questions I had regarding our topic of Mark Wahlberg here. Are there roles that he is consistently good at or just roles that he isn't bad at?
Yeah, I think
Go ahead, Hugo.
what we started saying is the fact that he plays a similar type in a lot of his movies is because he gives you just a base consistency of performance.
Right. So the question is that good?
Perhaps quite. Well, I mean, there are actors who are one note, but you love them in the roles that they do. Like, Keanu Reeves is an example that comes to mind.
Sure.
He doesn't have a lot of emotional range and all that, but at the roles that if you cast him in the right thing, he's great for that thing.
Sure.
And I think Mark Wahlberg hasn't had as much luck as Keanu, or isn't as good as Keanu at choosing projects. But he could have been one of those guys that he's very one note, but in the thing that he does, he's quite good, and so he could have worked in more movies than he had. I think the real problem is what Josh says is the choice of what kinds of movies he's decided to do.
I mean, like I said, he has a lane, and he's good in that lane.
Yes.
In terms of like what characters he's consistently good at, I think that everyone knows this, that the hyper-masculine cop or criminal or just, or soldier. And I almost feel bad saying that because, again, he tried to step out of that lane for The Happening to play a science teacher, and it did not go well.
He stepped out of it for The Lovely Bones as well. A
little ill-conceived movie, in my opinion. But
I will say, though, Instant Family is like this tiny little comedy that I watched it today, and he's quite good in it. He just plays the dad character, and he's pretty decent in it, but the film is really good around him.
Yeah,
sure.
I mean,
so it's really emotional and nice and charming. So
and
watch it.
That's a nice change of pace. I think he's good in that too. What I've seen, but I think that where he's best is I think his career highlight is the movies he's made with Peter Berg. In the second half of the last decade, he made an unofficial trilogy with Peter Berg with Deepwater Horizon, Lone Survivor, and Patriots Day. Those are all based on true events, action thrillers, with Mark Wahlberg in the center and Peter Berg directing. And those are all like well-renowned movies, and consensus is he's really good in all of those. And that's kind of his lane. And some movies take advantage of that lane, like Daddy's Home, for example, is another comedy with Will Ferrell where he plays the image of that people have of Mark Wahlberg. They really lean into that in that movie, and he just plays up to that as a contrast to Will Ferrell. And that works a lot too. Real quick, Patriots Day, the Peter Berg movie that I just mentioned, I think that's also kind of like indicative of the larger Wahlberg trend for me, which is that he plays like a morally upstanding, like always does the right thing, like just the good guy. And even though that movie is based on a true story, Mark Wahlberg is a fictional character in that. And like, I don't know, in terms of, to give it an ungenerous read, if Wahlberg picks his parts just for the, to look cool, it makes sense that he would put himself in the center of this movie as like the guy that just happens to be where all the action is in finding the Boston Marathon bombers. Yeah. Like Kevin Bacon plays a real guy, John Goodman plays a real guy, J.K. Simmons plays a real guy, and then Mark Wahlberg is just there for every important moment in that investigation, and he's kind of, he gets the big speech at the end about good and evil and all that kind of stuff.
So, if I could just ask one last question, because our topic is Boone or Bane, basically, is he good for the movies he's in, or is he actually a detriment? My question would be, in the movies that you guys feel that he was good, would you say that they could cast just about anybody else and have it, like, I'll even say, I'll restrict it to anyone else in that genre, like if in the action movie genre, all the action movies he's done, could you have plugged in Keanu Reeves in those roles as an example, and would they be better?
Look, you can't ask me this question specifically.
Just Keanu as an example, like plug in Liam Neeson in those action roles. Plug in Tom
Clive
Cruise.
Owen.
Yeah, Clive Owen. Plug in an action movie star,
yeah.
one of those guys that is notorious for being in action movies. Plug him into that role.
If we're talking about the kind of generic action movies that he's been doing, I don't know that it would make that much of a difference if the actor was that much better or worse than he is.
Okay.
I don't think I don't think the central performance of action movie where that is a 6 out of 10 will improve that film or make it worse by a large margin. So I don't think that makes too much of a difference. But I do think there are a few movies where he's used so well that I don't know if you could. I would have a hard time, seeing another actor in his role in The Departed, for example.
I think
in terms of
I think you could replace Mark Wahlberg with Matt Damon in nearly every role and maybe improve it a little bit.
Sure.
With little exception, like for example, The Other Guys and Daddy's Home and the movies he's made with Will Ferrell, where like they really are like putting him in the exact lane he needs to be in. Mm-hmm. I think he's perfect in those, and no one else would be an improvement.
It wouldn't be any better with a different straight man. Yes,
but I think that otherwise, you could replace him and maybe improve it a little bit. I don't want to be unkind, but that's how I feel.
Yeah, I think the general consensus across this conversation is that he's not usually bad. Like I never think that there's, with the few exceptions where like I truly think that he made The Happening worse. The Happening was bad without him, but I think he
did not ruin The Happening though.
He didn't ruin it. Like I said, it was bad to begin with, but there's
no improving that.
The whole scene where he's talking to the students at the beginning of the movie. Well, you don't care about bees? Well, you gotta care about bees. Like, there's no like you.
The toughest moment in that movie for me. The toughest moment in that movie is in the midpoint when they're in the field and the other people in the field they're shooting themselves.
Yes,
and
you gotta give me a chance to think.
It's a very odd close up on his face where he's like, "All right, come on, douchebag, use the scientific method," and like talking to himself like that. And like again, there's confoundingly baffling creative choices across the board by a lot of people besides just Mark Wahlberg. But yeah, that scene's rough for everyone involved.
So, but like those scenes make it so that I truly think that as bad as The Happening was, his performance in there was enough to make it even worse for me. But for the majority of his movies, go ahead.
To me, honestly, like The Happening, it's the kind of movie that the performances are so bad that they become funny to me, and the only way for me to get through the film is like to kind of laugh at some of the ridiculous lines that they're saying and how over the top they are.
There's already a movement to kind of reevaluate The Happening as a ode to 1950s camp, and I kind of see that in some of it, like when the construction worker looks up and says, "Dear God in heaven," or so, it's so over the top that like I kind of get that read, but it's also like
I think that's revisionist history for me because M. Night Shyamalan has
the intention.
M. Night Shyamalan has said that he was going for B-movie camp.
Yeah,
in The Happening, he has said that. Sure. But I feel like that's revisionist history because when you watch the movie, I think there's enough of it that looks like you're trying to make a real movie. That you can't claim it was B-movie camp.
It can be both. There's certainly some B-movie camp that's very clearly intentional. When he talks to the plastic plant, that's very clearly intentionally.
Okay, that's fair.
Shitty,
I'll give you that. I'll give you that scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, so in any case, I just feel like in the majority of his movies, he's fine. He's not a bad actor.
Yeah.
I think in the vast majority of his movies, he doesn't actually make it any worse for most of them. But I think that all of them could be better with someone else. Not all of them, but you know what I mean. Most of them. So in that way, he is kind of a bane, because if you could plug in a different actor and make the movie better, then that means that the actor that you did use made the movie worse.
Yeah, I guess that for the most part, I agree with you. He really, I don't want to keep harping on this, but he really doesn't have much range. And when he's like asked to do things that are outside of his range, that's when like it, he's kind of laid bare, and like you see his limitations. I'm thinking of a few scenes in like the movie Rockstar where he's got to like reach an emotion. I'm like, it's not, you're not doing it for me, buddy. But I wish you the best.
So I really think that the best thing for him to do, especially in terms of selecting his movies, is to either continue with the action movies that he does with Peter Berg, that sort of thing, because he's fine in those, and they fit his machismo, his genre,
his skill set.
If he's going to be in, serious movies that like The Departed was, or All the Money in the World, or The Lovely Bones, those sort of serious topics, I feel like he would be better served in supporting roles than ever being an actual lead in those movies, because the lead is going to require more range, and if you can plug him in one of those supporting roles and allow him to use the skills that he really is truly good at, then I think that he can actually add to the movies he's in. I think he's got to be more selective on the movies.
Yeah,
it's
for
basically
sure.
what it comes down to. He can't Samuel Jackson this.
No. Definitely not. I do agree. Like, I think in supporting roles, his skill set and even his persona to some extent can be used to make something that fits a certain movie. But yeah, as a lead, he's not like, I see, this movie stars Mark Wahlberg, I'm not like going to be excited about that movie.
I think he's happy with his career. I mean, he's he's made his money. Yeah. He's made his image.
He doesn't care.
He's not Brad Pitt. He's not Matt Damon. He's Mark Wahlberg. He's good at being Mark Wahlberg.
Very good note to end it on there, Josh. Yeah. I appreciate that. What are we doing next week, Hugo?
So next week, I thought we could watch, because it's a movie that's I think is going to be nominated for Oscars in the foreign language category. That just I think was very recently made available on VOD, and it's a movie called Another Round. It's going to be our film to remember.
Woo woo.
It stars Mads Mikkelsen. It's a Danish film about like teachers that decide to start day drinking, and it's sort of a drama comedy by the same director as The Hunt. So
great movie,
acclaimed director. Yeah, absolutely. And I think our topic is going to be we're going to highlight some of our favorite sort of non-English films, foreign films. We'll decide how many and how we're going to decide to highlight them, and maybe talk a bit about why they're so overlooked.
And maybe we can talk about Hollywood coming up with a better way to describe movies that aren't made in English.
Yes.
Because it's so hard to come up with the right term.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so that's going to be our topic for next week. Thank you for joining us. And if you would, please like, subscribe, and share. I'd appreciate it. Maybe make some comments on the video. Talk to us about your feelings on Mark Wahlberg. Or maybe if you have a foreign film that you'd like to suggest that we watch for next week, go ahead and throw it out there. Until next time, thank you for joining us.